I want you all to put your left hand up. Your left hand. Just raise your left hand, that's all. Every single person, even the slackers at the back, that's right. Now, I want you to pretend that the person next to you has a doorbell on the pan. It's a door and there's a doorbell. And I want you to turn to your partner and press the doorbell as if you were pressing the bell to go in through the door. Come on, everyone. Okay, fun's over. How many people use their index finger, this finger, to press the bell? Almost everyone. How many people here use their thumb? Hey, the two guys. This guy works in the computer science department. He's the exception to the rule. Now, I showed you that experiment. It is a serious point here, because when Intel were doing research in Japan back across to Europe with this, if you were all 13 and 14-year-olds, it would be the other way around. You'd be using your thumb. Why do 13-year-olds use their thumb? Because they text a lot. Because they text a lot, and boys use PlayStations, Xboxes, and so on. And this is one of the things I've found missing. On the awards last night, there was an award for video, games, high-end. There was no award for text. Nothing. And yet that's exactly what 11 to 17-year-olds do nearly every 10 minutes. Okay, so as baby boomers, we use this finger. Younger folk use the thumb. When I asked I have two boys, they're just turned 18. When I asked them about this experiment, this was their reaction. Because this is another thing you've got to be quite careful of here. The assumption that you know what these kids want, that you think when you have them in the school that you can teach them collaboration skills when they collaborate nearly every 2 minutes themselves. And they look at you and you go, you are going to teach me about collaboration when I use BitTorrent every night? I'm on Facebook every 5 minutes. In fact, in the Middle East, I've just changed our government, and you're going to give me a course on collaboration skills? I think we should be very careful about what we think 21st century skills are and how we're going to approach that problem. Another thing that's been missing, I think, here is the whole learn by doing thing. You know, this whole notion that one has to pick up concrete physical procedural skills to operate in the real world. We have had a century and a half of theory around this, from William James, Dewey, Kolb, Schenck, but precious little of this seems to happen until they leave school and go into perhaps an apprenticeship or the workplace. And I want to think in terms of a couple of really basic principles in the psychology of learning for a moment. And I want you to reflect for a moment on the last holiday you were on, sitting on the beach, cycling, walking. Just have that in your mind's eye for a moment. Because what you've just done is rely on episodic memory to bring back the sort of thing that video's good at. If, however, I were to ask you a mathematical problem, a very simple addition like 2 plus 5 equals, think of the answer in your head, you're using your semantic memory. You're coming back from the meaning of those terms and the rule associated with that mathematical function. If I ask you about riding a bike, you've got procedural memory. Now, in terms of the optimum use of media, if we're going to get this right and we're really using media in the right way, we really have to think about some basic stuff around the psychology of learning. And rule number 1 is understand the distinction between episodic and semantic memory. Because those people who want to use text all the time are just too affixed to semantic memory. And those people who just want to produce video all the time, all the TV guys, they're just obsessed with episodic memory. And we need both. In fact, we need all three of these. The second principle in the psychology of learning is cognitive overload. Now, this is almost a disease in learning because most of the time, if you've been through a college or university degree, you will have been bored at lectures because lectures go on for an hour, it's far too long, and you sort of crap out after 10 minutes and get really bored after 20. In fact, many students don't even bother turning up for lectures at all. They can be so boring. We still think this is pedagogically normal to stand there and speak at people for a full hour without interruption. That's quite strange. Let me do another experiment with you just to keep you awake. I know English is your second language, but you can do this in your own language as well. I want you all to chant the months of the year, right? From January, February on cue. So January, February, March, every time I do a finger wag, right? I'm going to start with January. Do it in English or your own language, right? January, February. Brilliant. 100%. Correct. Now do that in alphabetical order. You ready? Right, okay. Now the reason for that is we all have pretty crap working memories. We can hold, there's a very famous paper written by George Miller called 7 plus and minus 2, and he made the claim that you can hold 7 items plus or minus 2 in short-term memory. That's actually been proven to be hopelessly optimistic. Most of us can do about 3 or 4, which is why you certainly can't hold the 12 months and jiggle them around in your head to get the alphabetical list. And this is a big problem for learning because working memory is this tiny, horrible gap through which all learning must go. And until you understand what that gap is, and until you slow down with your kids, you make big mistakes. And new teachers rush at it. They ask the kids questions, hands up kids, and then they give them the answer before the kids have had time to breathe. You need a full 3 seconds. That's a long time in a classroom to wait. 1, 2, 3. But kids need the time to breathe. And the same is true of media. And this fast and furious approach to new media, maybe that's not such a good thing. So cognitive overload is the second one. Now try this one, because it's another disease in learning, which is the notion that we can cope with things through multi-sensory channels. I want you all to start on my cue again, reading from top left horizontally across here, but I want you to say the color and not the word. So say green and not yellow. Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. Now this happens all the time in multimedia. When you get a piece of text on the screen and somebody's put the audio track on at the same time and you've got to listen to the audio and read the text, because they go through 2 different channels and the 2 things clash and you get lots of cognitive dissonance. This is why when you see PowerPoint slides, when they've got hundreds of slides and the person turns around and starts reading them, and you go, are you mad? Send me the email. Because you can read at twice the speed they speak at. So lots of problems can be made in multimedia if you don't know those basic rules about cognitive dissonance, cognitive overload, and so on. Another myth that I think in a sense has been perpetuated at the conference is the idea that everybody is using video all the time, and graphics, and audio, and high-end multimedia. Most of these kids are using this stuff as pure text. When you're on Facebook, sure, you post the occasional video and photograph, but only so other people can comment on it through text. Text is the primary medium of the internet still for young people. In fact, more so than it was previously. And if they're using BBM or instant messenger, SMS, and on Facebook here, the multiple ways of using Facebook are really explicit. If you're using chat, if you're using the wall, or messaging, or updating your status, it's all text-based. And I think that's what we're missing here. The balanced use of media and learning across the board here. And here's the typical question that you've probably all been asked before. Find X. Now, I love the kid who could put this answer. I would employ this kid straight off tomorrow. Forget the kid who can understand Pythagoras' theorem. I'm 54 years old. I've never used Pythagoras' theorem. I'm sure you haven't. But the kid who came up with this nice solution to this problem, he's employable, or she. Because he understands that it's a waste of time, you know? This is a joke. He gets the joke. Let's run with it. Don't put a red pen through it and 0 marks. And these kids are asked to use pencils all the time. You know, my kids look at them as if they're Egyptian artifacts or something. You know, they don't quite know what they are. In the real world, folks, you may not have noticed, but we use keyboards. You know, when you go into the workplace, you're not writing long-form reports in pen and pencil. And yet hardly any assessment takes place using a medium. This is actually incredibly dangerous. Because if you ask a kid, or even at university, somebody to write a long-form essay and they can't re-edit, everybody who knows anything about writing knows that good writing is about reordering and restructuring the text. That's why word processors are brilliant. That's why writing a straightforward essay is hopeless by pen and pencil, because what do the kids do? I got a degree and PhD in philosophy by memorizing essays. That's what your kids are doing. They're memorizing essays and regurgitating them in exams. And you think it's creative and critical thinking? Because you're using pens and pencils. You're not giving them a chance to think or think creatively or reorder things. Video can be incredibly effective if it's done well, and it's short, and it's snappy, and it's well written, and well scripted. When it's done badly, it's worse than hopeless. Worse than hopeless. And Meer and Clark did the research to show why this was so. And it's quite shocking, the result, really. We do have YouTube. The internet, in a sense, has given us more pedagogic revolutions than all of the education departments and all of the universities in Europe put together. I've been in the learning game for nearly 30 years. I can barely think of a pedagogic change or recommendation from an education department that I've implemented. I can't actually think of one right now. YouTube, however, has shown us that short, snappy, well-written, impactful stuff works. It's a Darwinian process, and the internet gives us clues. It changed the pedagogy of video, which is why all the video you're producing now isn't that old half-hour, one-hour TV stuff. It's 15 minutes, which is far too long, or much shorter. But here's the rub. When Meer and Clark looked at the use of video in terms of the sort of stuff that you need in semantic knowledge, you know, and on this one it was understanding the physics of lightning, and they showed a piece of video that showed a tree being struck. Actually, those who did not see the video did 30% better in the test. And this experiment has been repeated a number of times. In other words, video can be a massive distraction in learning. When you're accessing semantic memory for mathematics and so on, the video can actually destroy the learning. It can destroy the learning. You may not believe it, but you should be doing the research and reading if you don't. The problem is, almost everyone who teaches in the university has done no reading in the psychology of learning, because there is no adequate teaching in that area. This is what happens in virtual worlds when things go really, really badly wrong. We take the lecture, which is hopeless in the real world, and then we spend a couple of €100,000 reproducing it in Second Life. And I've seen hundreds of these. I used to make it my sort of mission in life to go to these lectures and sit and count, and there's hardly anyone there. There's usually two people, you know, the lecturer and his mate. Basically, you know, absolutely hopeless. And this notion that we replicate bad practice in new media is all over the place. So go back to the psychology of learning, go back to learning, the theory of learning, keep it simple. Less is more in learning, and we may get somewhere. Because media rich is not always mind rich, not at all. In fact, very often in learning, you have to pare down, you have to cut text until it bleeds, you have to keep it simple, simple, simple. You don't have to be a teacher for long to know that that's true. But when multimedia comes into the game, suddenly we go crazy. And we build these things that are very often more like cars from a scrapyard, to be honest, with bits and bobs cobbled together, rather than something that's sleek, well-designed, and works in terms of retention and recall. Now, I'll end in this slide because I think really the education landscape now is not being shaped by pedagogical experiments in school or pedagogic theorizing in our education departments. The educational landscape is being changed by these people and others who will come in their wake. And we have Tim Berners-Lee, who gave us the web here in Europe, English guy out of Switzerland at CERN. We have Jeff Bezos. How many people have never ordered a book on Amazon? One person, it's okay. Two people, right? Yeah. Isn't it great when you tear open that cardboard box, revolutionized book buying? Jimmy Wales of Wikipedia, almost pure text. Brilliant. The late, great Steve Jobs in Apple, who gave us those wonderful machines in terms of podcasting and the sort of things we use, my kids use. Linux, the guy who really ended up giving us open educational resources. All that open source stuff that you're discussing and getting on with here today is down to guys like this who pioneered this at the back end. You're now doing it at the front end. And then the most boring billionaire on the planet, Mr. Zuckerberg, who's given us the 800 million people, and people think think it has no relevance in education. Are they crazy? Are they crazy? You know, when Gutenberg invented the printing press, there were only 400 million people on planet Earth. There are 800 million people on Facebook. This is an absolute phenomenal number. And then we have the Google, YouTube, Twitter stuff along the bottom here, which is what every kid does every day of their lives.